Welcome to Let's Face It. I'm Lorraine Croston, wellness coach at Eating Evolution. My guest today is Joanne Shaw. She's the owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design and is the host of her own internet radio gardening show called Down the Garden Path, where she offers practical advice on all plants and garden related things. She's passionate about creating gardens for real people with busy lives. She creates them so that they will suit the lifestyles, tastes, and budgets of her clients. I have often heard her say, "You wouldn't build a house without a plan. Why would you do that with your garden?" Welcome, Joanne. I am so glad that you could be here today.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, for having me.
The first question I have is, what's the difference between a landscape architect and a landscape designer?
Okay, well, the simple answer is education. A landscape architect has it's a university degree, and I always jokingly say they are better at math. And landscape architects pretty much work on commercial projects, large-scale projects, even like subdivisions, that type of thing. Whereas a landscape designer is working with primarily residential, smaller spaces, definitely looking at different aspects of the garden.
Okay, good. What do you see as the most common mistakes that people make when they're doing their landscaping? You're do-it-yourselfers.
Yes. I think grouping, people, especially with gardening, can be very impulsive, and they buy one of this and one of that and one of this and one of that. And then when you put it all together, it doesn't really look cohesive, and it really doesn't give the curb appeal that most people are looking for. So sometimes less is more. Finding 3 plants that you like and buying 3 or 5 of those plants, and it will have a bigger impact with less variety.
What do you think are some of the big trends for this spring?
Well, the trend for a while has been making the backyard into an outdoor room.
Yeah.
So that's, that lingo as far as furniture and space has definitely been around for a few years. And I don't see it slowing down. I think it's definitely stepping up.
Right.
So now people are, in addition to the outdoor rooms, they're really looking at outdoor kitchens. It's not just a space for the barbecue. They're looking for a countertop, to go around the barbecue, possibly a sink, the outdoor kitchen, as well as not just an eating area. People want the lounging area. They're looking at fire pits, outdoor lounging areas, a reason to get off the patio and a reason to go into the yard a little bit more.
What's the favorite type of property to design for?
I think a small space,
Really?
I think when you're dealing with a small space, again, every measurement counts. So you have to be very careful. But I think the transformation sometimes can be even more impactful. And it's function, it's fashion,
Right.
and those details will be noticed more than they will be in a large landscape.
Right, because if you've got a really small space and you put a little statuette, you'll see the statuette because you don't have very far to go, but you put that same statuette in a large environment and it's a little detail that, oh yeah, look, I never noticed that before. And the advantage of a small space is you don't have to spend as much for all of the things that you're putting in it because you don't have to put as much.
Sometimes yes, but if you're doing more details, then maybe not.
Yeah, of course.
But
Okay.
yes.
We look at, we're talking about residential mostly. What would be an easy fix to add to someone's front landscaping for sort of like instant curb appeal?
Okay. Clean edges, I would say. That sometimes people kind of let the grass kind of encroach on the garden and make the garden look really small. So I think it's okay to have space between your plants and your grass, like to have that, so I think making things bigger doesn't necessarily mean you have to add more plants, but I think it just provides you with that bigger impact and that cleaner look. And I also think adding a focal point. So whether it is a flowering shrub, Japanese maple, something architectural, I really love. I'm kind of addicted to weeping trees. So it can be a big thing. Not everybody has room for a big thing, but it can be a small thing too. Right. The focal point doesn't necessarily need to be right at the front door. That's another common thing that people will put something, very close to the front door, thinking that's where the focal point is, but those things grow. And, we've all visited the homes where we've had to duck under the focal point or move around it in the path.
What 2 things would you recommend that people should do when it comes to their yards?
I think certainly thinking of seasonal. I think I often encourage my clients to take photos of their garden at different times of the year, because I get heard that often, where my garden looks great in the spring, but then the rest of the year it's just green. And really consider the seasons, because I think that's really important. I think something should be happening in the garden at all times. And someone who knows their plant material can help with that, because there are a lot of plants these days that I say do 2 things. It may flower in the spring and then the foliage goes red in the fall.
Why hire you?
Just like when you're dealing with the decor on the inside of your house, it's nice to have someone look at it from a fresh perspective and really provide that professional assessment as far as the scale of things. Sometimes we think our garden looks great and nice and full, but when you stand back and look, your house is very tall and your garden is only 3 feet deep. The number one thing people will say to me when they call me is that they want a low maintenance garden. And to me, the low maintenance is the right plant in the right spot. If you are having to, if the plants are reaching because they're looking for the light, or no, they're not thriving because they're not in the right light, that is really what it comes down to. So that is the money savings, is that we'll put the right plant in the right space, the right quantity, the right spacing. So I think it's important for someone to be at your home, to look at what your neighbors have, to look out your windows and see what your views are. Because as much as you want your outside to look pretty when you're outside, quite frankly, many of us are still inside looking out at our yards. So I think the views from our home are very important. And I think that, again, ties back to the professional assessment, because I'm just trained and naturally looking at all of that. Also, another popular thing where I will suggest, a tree in their backyard, let's say if it's a clean slate, and they'll say, oh no, I don't have any privacy issues. I don't need a tree because all 3 of my neighbors have trees, or my one neighbor has a lot of trees.
Until they chop it down. Exactly.
So it's good to have someone really think about things that you might not have thought about.
Great. Let's face it. As much as we may want to be do-it-yourselfers and think that we're great at everything, we're not. Sometimes it's better to just get someone to give us a little bit of a hand, and then what we have is something that is truly spectacular rather than a mishmash of whatever it is that we put together. Every year there seems to be like the plant that everybody should have, or maybe a color scheme. What's the color, or what's the plant du jour that we're having this year?
Oh, this year, okay. So this year it is actually a bulb. It's actually allium is the plant of the year this year.
Okay.
And that is neat because they're great bulb, because they bloom a long time, and you can get them small or you can get them quite tall. So they really add a nice feature in the garden, and they bloom at a really interesting time after the other bulbs like the daffodils and the tulips are done, but before a lot of the flowering shrubs have started. So they're a really nice gap filler, and the squirrels don't like them.
The voles don't either.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the allium, and the voles don't like them. So if anything's digging through your garden, that actually keeps them away. That's a great one to have. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Let's Face It. I'm Lorraine Croston. See you next time.